tourne partout.
Okay. For you, what is Trump?
For me, I'm sorry, what is what?
What is Trump?
Trump. I'm often asked about the situation in my country today since Donald Trump was elected president, and it's sometimes a difficult question to answer. I have a degree of pity for Donald Trump, first of all, because I believe he's a sick man. I think he has a serious psychological illness that it's known as narcissistic personality disorder, but in some circles it's known as malignant narcissistic personality disorder. And it requires that he think of no one but himself. He has no empathy. He cannot fail to respond to anything he deems as criticism, all of which creates a package which, since he's been elected president of the United States, is a very dangerous one. It's, of course, my opinion, although it is also the opinion of a number of psychiatrists and psychologists of whom I've read, some of whom I've spoken to. So what I think about when I'm asked about what I think of Donald Trump, I fear for the country, and I fear for the world, because he is at present the most powerful human being on the face of the earth, in that he is in control of the largest army and the most powerful nuclear force. So that's very much a concern. I think of him as a danger to this country, and I think of him as a danger to the world. With a certain amount of pity. I think anybody who is psychologically harmed, psychologically damaged, as I believe him to be, deserves our sympathy and also deserves our concern, but particularly concern when that person acts without apparent awareness of the realities of the world, without apparent concern for the welfare of significant parts of the population of this country and the rest of the world. So I have hope that the fail-safe facilities that are available to us in this country will protect us from his excesses, but in the meantime, I think he's doing terrible damage to the body politic and to the nation.
Why is Trump so harshly criticized by Hollywood?
I'm sorry, I'll have to ask you to repeat that.
Why is Trump so much criticized by
criticized?
by Hollywood?
The relationship of President Trump and Hollywood is discussed a lot, and it's based on the assumption that Hollywood is a monolithic organization that has a particular view, and that's not the case. Hollywood is simply a community mostly associated with the film and television business. But there's no unanimity in Hollywood. The right wing of this country, the more conservative, mostly the extreme conservative branches of the country, for whom Trump seems to speak these days, thinks of us all as liberals, all as progressives, all as, I suppose, communists in some way. But they're wrong. The Hollywood community has members of all sides of the political view. There are conservatives and liberals and people who are independent and people who have no particular political awareness at all. But the relationship that is established then, because of the assumption on the part of Trump and the right-wing ideologues that seem to control his thinking at this point, is a very bad one. He feels that we are against him, that we are a unified force against him, which we're not. There are many people in Hollywood that think he's just dandy, I guess. But for those of us, and I don't claim to speak for a large part of any population, I believe what I believe. And from my perspective, and I think the perspective of people who, if you will, in Hollywood, have a degree of empathy because imaginative people, people who work in the motion picture and television industries who are creative, tend to be able to think of others and empathize with others and feel sympathies for the plight of others. Those are qualities that I think Trump lacks. And as a result, we are something of a threat. We're perceived as something of a threat to him.
With Trump, the censorship return in Hollywood, it's a risk?
One of the big concerns in our industry is always, given the history of the Hollywood 10 and the blacklisting that happened now 70 years ago, and less and longer than that. One of the big concerns is always, are they going to clamp down? Will there be censorship? Will there be a requirement that we become less free in the way we express ourselves? That will not happen. There will be an attempt. They are now trying, as I understand it, to paint anyone who opposes them as clearly unpatriotic, but more than that, I think they're trying to expand the concept of terrorist to include people who are in the streets opposing these Trumpian, if you will, policies that are being put forward by this administration, particularly by the Justice Department at this point, but to some degree by others as well. So, and the Environmental Protection Agency, so-called, is now being run by a man who is totally against the environment. So we have these kinds of results that from the Trump's lack of understanding or lack of empathy or lack of intelligence, although he considers himself to be the most intelligent human being in the world. But he doesn't apparently have the intelligence to understand the ramifications of some of his decisions. So we face people and policies that are very destructive. And there will be more opposition in the streets. And there will be an attempt, I think, to stop us, to categorize those of us who oppose him as traitors, as outlaws, as in some way villains. As far as censorship itself, as censorship as we knew it back in the days of the Red Scares, for example, I doubt that the industries will succumb to that. I can't imagine we had in those days organizations that simply disallowed people's free speech. They wouldn't allow people to work if they were tainted with a certain association. In those days it was communism, but today it would be anti-Trumpism or something. I frankly don't think there's going to be censorship. I don't think people will allow it, but there will be attempts to reconfigure the way people approach different policies and different approaches to policy change, and it will be it'll be difficult. For example, today, the very hard extreme right of the Israeli community wants to paint anyone who criticizes Israel policies as anti-Semitic. That's stupid, wrong, and unfair, but it is something they're doing because they want to solidify their own position in control in Israel and in the Middle East in general. And unfortunately, they have an ally in President, I hate to use the term President Trump, in Mr. Trump. And that's very frustrating, but that's an example of the kind of thing, the kind of rethinking or rejiggering language that these people are capable of. So that they're now using the term traitor, for example. They refer to Mr. Mueller, the man who's appointed to be the head of the investigation of the Trump administration's relationship with Russia in the election, as a traitor. Some people on the right are calling him a traitor, and therefore they will call me a traitor because I think what he's doing is a good job. But I doubt that they'll be successful in instituting any real form of censorship.
Est-ce qu'un acteur est un citoyen comme les autres, en fait, et doit s'engager?
Is an actor a regular citizen, or by the fact is a public person? What kind of citizen is an actor?
You know, there's some confusion in our country about the status that is given to people who attain a certain degree of success in our business, in show business, we'll call it. Because some of us choose to remember that we are also citizens. And as citizens, we have a certain responsibility to be involved in the processes in our country. Actors are the same kinds of citizens as our teachers and doctors and people on the dole. But because of there's a little bit of imbalance in our society. Actors are sometimes considered the royalty of America because we don't have the kind of royal status normally associated with monarchies in this country. All people are supposed to be on the same level, but what we've done, sadly, is accord a degree of superiority over time. This has been happening. Accord a degree of superiority to people of great wealth. And that, I think, is a real problem in this country. Some actors who achieve a great deal of success also achieve a great deal of wealth, and that has, I suppose, found a way to put people in categories that are above that of the average citizen. But I've always felt that citizens, all of us, have not only rights but responsibilities to be involved in the kind of efforts that we feel called to. Thomas Jefferson said the great strength of this nation was in an involved and informed citizenry. And first of all, people aren't informed as well as they should be. And secondly, people aren't as involved as well as they should be. So when people do become informed and they do become involved, it creates open dissent sometimes if policies are going wrong in terms of the way people feel. And in other times, of course, we're fully engaged and supportive of policies. For example, a major issue in the country today is that of how we as a nation and as a people respond to the challenges of global warming, or climate change, as it's now being known as. We have deniers in this country, and unfortunately, Trump is a denier, and Trump is in league with very powerful people who are deniers of the actual existence of this phenomenon called climate change, which is visible all around us, but they refuse to acknowledge it. And as a result, many of us, myself included, are very deeply involved in trying to bring attention to the people, bring the people's attention, I should say, to the realities of the dangers associated with climate change. Mr. Trump will continue to slough it off and ignore it and call it a hoax and call it a nonsense on his appointees in policy-making decisions are saying that it's nonsense, that it's not true, that it's all fakery, that it's all some sort of liberal scam or connivance. So that sort of thing is very much a concern, and I will later today actually be doing a lecture associated with a play I do about climate change at a university, and I think it's very important for us to be involved in these things. And my being involved in that thing, just as I was when I was involved in opposing the war in Iraq and the other things that I've been involved in over time, makes me seen as an enemy by the people in power in this administration. That I see as an insult because I'm acting as a citizen.
Do you understand pro-trans actors like John Voight, Clint Eastwood?
There are, as I've said, this is a community of many, many different people with very different points of view. And some of them have very strong points of view that are very directly counter to mine. And in general, I understand people disagreeing. I understand about people saying that one economic system is preferred over another economic system. There are some who say capitalism is great. There are some who say capitalism is okay but must be fixed. There are others who say capitalism is the death of the society. There's socialism, which in our country has been tainted by association with communism. And there are, I'm sure, others that I'm not naming. But beyond economics, there are actors and people in our society who tend to be very, very deeply conservative and very, very deeply, in my experience, frightened. And that puts them in a position very different from my own. I believe in the fundamental decency of people, and I believe in the value of all people having rights, equal rights. There are those who believe that people must be subjugated by those with better knowledge, or those with more money, or those with more power. I consider those inappropriate. I think those are oligarchic or monarchic or fascistic perspectives, and I think that those are dangerous, and they are antithetical to everything I believe this country is supposed to be about. So we debate, but that's fine as long as the debate is open, and as both sides are allowed to speak, then I have no problem with it.
We saw online that you participate in a video that I'm not sure what was the subject, with Martin Sheen and James Cromwell about the c'était quoi, c'était la candidature
je sais plus, c'était to criticize maybe the candidacy.
Do you remember that video? It was a warning for the Republican candidate.
I'm sorry, a warning for
during the comment on dit les primaires? The caucus, the Republican primary, the caucus, the Republican caucus.
Because I tend to be outspoken politically, I am asked quite often to participate in interviews like this, and it can be about the use of the death penalty, which I adamantly oppose. It can be about prisons. It can be about war. It can be about politics. It can be about particular politicians. I don't frankly remember being interviewed for a documentary about Mr. Trump, but I may well have been, and if I did, I hope I spoke very clearly about my concerns about his psychological state and his condition and the wrong-headedness of his policies.
En
Can you explain us your experience with Fox News TV and your interview on the set of Fox News TV?
Well, because I tend to be outspoken, I've been invited sometimes to debate, sometimes to simply be interviewed, but often if it's on we have a very right-wing, biased news organization. They call themselves news at any rate. Organization called Fox News and 20th Century Fox, which has to be separated a little bit. I did a television series for many years under the aegis of 20th Century Fox. 20th Century Fox is now owned by the same man who owns Fox News, and they tend to be very much to the right in terms to the conservative side of the political spectrum. And periodically I've been invited to be on either Bill O'Reilly's show or Sean Hannity's show, or I've forgotten his name, another man's shows, talking about political issues and talking about Donald Trump, for example, during the recent election campaign. And it usually ends up to be a sparring contest, because they are very much in support of him and his policies, and I'm very much opposed to him and his policies. But over time, you know, I've been doing it since long before Donald Trump was on the scene. I did it in opposition to the war in Iraq. I did it in opposition to many of the policies that the right wing has put forward about women and about gay people and about minorities. And for me, it's I won't say fun, although sometimes it is fun, but it's at least an opportunity for those people who are wedded to that side of the political spectrum and are expecting to get their news from these people. At least it gives them an opportunity to hear from someone who has a different point of view, and hopefully some of what I say penetrates.
Do you think you can change opinion of pro-Trump citizen actors? It's possible to change this opinion?
I think there are a number of different reasons for people's support for Donald Trump. Some of them are angry because they feel the political system has failed them, and they just wanted change, so they voted for Donald Trump because he represented something that was not the political establishment or the normal political spectrum, part of the normal political spectrum. Others have adopted a support for him that I believe is kind of a cult of personality, in which even when you point out the fallacies of his statements and the wrong-headedness of his policies, they ignore them because they think that he is somehow gifted, a gifted leader, a kind of Mussolini. I frankly compared him to Mussolini during the early days of the campaign, because he's sort of full of bravado and bravissimo and nonsense, but very, very self-congratulatory. And that to me is frightening, that people who fall under the spell of someone who is a big, broad, vulgar bully of a leader, and are willing to sort of let go of whatever the fundamental values are that they had as citizens of this country. That is very worrisome. So I think there are the different grades of support for Mr. Trump. Those people who are angry at the system will wake up, I think, and they can be talked to. Those people who are part of a cult of personality will be impervious to any kind of argument against him. And those people, the other ones that I find most repulsive, are the ones who know fully well that he is a danger, that he is a man totally unfit to be the President of the United States, but he serves them by supporting the policies that they think are the ones that will make them more rich and more powerful. Those are the ones that I find most reprehensible, and the ones that I think are the most hypocritical and therefore should be condemned. They are the ones who will fall the hardest and feel the worst when these days are over. And I think these days will be over before too long.
Do you know the preferred movie of Mr. Trump is favorite movie of Mr. Trump is Citizen Kane. Can we compare Citizen Kane and Citizen Trump?
It's been said that his favorite movie is Citizen Kane, and some people want to make the comparisons between the Citizen Kane and Citizen Trump. It's not a game I want to play. I think Citizen Kane was someone who was tortured by a loss, let's say, in his childhood, and wedded to a set of values that was totally false. In those instances, I think that's true. That's true of Mr. Trump as well. I think he was probably psychologically brutalized as a child. And I think that his reaction in terms of his development as his psychology, excuse me, I think the development of his psychological makeup as a result of it has been impaired. So there would be comparisons there, perhaps. But I think it's important for people to understand that whatever the case, this man is a bully and a boor, a braggart, and a totally insensitive in the best sense of the word, if there is a good sense to that word. His lack of sensitivity to the needs of other human beings is appalling, and I think it is leading us our nation in a very dangerous direction.
Have you, during your career, have you ever experienced censorship or political limitation because of your engagement and point of view?
Because I'm outspoken politically and active in areas that are sometimes controversial, the question often arises whether or not there is a kind of more subtle blacklist. Some people refer to it as a gray list. And they ask if I'm on it. And I have no idea. It has been suggested that because I'm critical of some of the policies of the State of Israel, and we have a large, very powerful right-wing Jewish community, that I'm persona non grata. I don't know that. I am very, I'm not sure if you are aware, maybe you probably are aware in France of something called Scientology. And I am an opponent of Scientology. I believe Scientology is a cult. And I've been very public about that, and that makes me, in their minds, a suppressive person, what they call an SP. So if there are any Scientologists in positions of power, I'm sure they don't want to work with me. But in general, I've never been aware of anyone who refused to work with me or indicated I should not work because of my political positions. If it has happened, I'm happily unaware of it. And I'm not particularly concerned about it. I think that there are probably as many people who like what I say, who would want to work with me for the very same reasons. So I've never been aware of any, I've never been confronted, I should say, with any overt bias and as a reason for my not getting a job. I remember one instance where I was being asked to be considered. I was asked to consider a role in a movie about the bombing of Hiroshima. And after having read the script and seeing that it was not apologetic and not ruining what we did, it was in a way championing the work of the people who did this terrible thing, I said I would not be part of it. And I didn't know, I told the producer, I said, not only will I not be part of it, I can't imagine why you want to make this film. So I probably didn't make myself popular in that instance.
Quel personnage incarne le mieux
Ouais, il y avait celle-là, et il y avait aussi, est-ce que finalement Hollywood, en mettant en valeur des personnages immoraux, cyniques, celle-là, tu gardes celle-là. Has Hollywood a responsibility to the election of Mr. Trump by sometimes, representing heroical figures, but cynical ones, great characters that are killers and immoral persons,
or Gordon Gekko in Wall Street.
That kind of guys, with no values except money, for example, or power. But is there maybe a responsibility by telling too much stories like that, or?
Yeah, there's a question about Hollywood's responsibility in promoting the archetype, if you will, of the villainous good guy, or the good guy with faults, or the, in some instances, overt villain. I don't believe so. I don't. I guess, and the question is, does that somehow manifest itself in the public's view as as adoring or being susceptible to leadership by these people, or moving these people into positions of authority? I think not. I think essentially Hollywood tells all kinds of stories, and some of them do glorify violence, which I'm very much opposed to. But I think Hollywood, like anything else, is a community that is made up of a lot of different people with a lot of different points of view. And the success of some films of questionable value morally do probably pose a little bit of a threat, but instead of being a threat, I think they are perceived, if they're perceived as a threat, they're debated. And that, I think, is a good thing. So I'm not a fan of the belief that Hollywood is somehow responsible for lowering our morals. I think that on some level Hollywood reflects more than affects the moral behavior of people. There has been, and the thing that does trouble me, there's been a tendency in all areas of expression, not only in Hollywood, but in all areas of expression, to do what they refer to as push the edge of the envelope. And that sometimes expresses itself in a way that how much more daring can we be? How much more outrageous can we be? And will we be getting more attention and more success and more money, frankly, by being more outrageous? And I think that is a problem. I think that's a very real problem. But I don't think it translates into the kind of support for the authoritarian view, except in the instances of some people. Some people might then think, as a result of them feeling that we've lost our way morally, that we have to put into power an authoritarian figure who will sort of snap us back, as a Hitler or a Mussolini was supposed to have done. It may taint the views of some people, but I don't think it has a deleterious effect on the moral standards in the society.
You know, like Scarface is like a hero, even in our suburbs. You know, the guy is a hero. It's not tell as a hero in the movie, but he's iconic now. So Trump is kind of an icon of something. Maybe he tells his pop culture is popular, is self-made man. Is you know, so is there a confusion between the reality of things, the facts, and the things that are created by the stories? Like Trump was created by TV. Is there a confusion when people are getting to vote, and do they elect a real person or the person that they see on the screen?
Well, we have, first of all, we have to recognize the fact that motion pictures and television are tremendously powerful, and that they do have an impact. They change, they not only change styles, they not only change the way people think about what is beautiful and what is less beautiful, but they also impact our moral understandings. And for that reason, I subscribe to that of a man years ago who said films are either life-affirming or life-denying. And I think there are some films that are life-denying, and those are dangerous. And people, if you get too much of that, you can certainly be harmed by it in terms of becoming more cynical and more jaded and more lost in terms of any sense of not only the value of others, but the value of oneself. So that can be a concern. But I think that's part of the path of life. We are faced with challenges everywhere and choices everywhere, and we make those choices. And sometimes we make ill choices, bad choices that are deleterious, that are really problematic for us as a people and us as individuals and us as a society. So when you elevate characters of poor quality, poor human value quality, it can be confusing to some people. Yes, I think that's quite right. But I don't think that we are so corrupted as a society that we are that we've bought into those ideas. I think there's a constant tension between the implicit valuing of money over everything else, success by crawling over the bodies of other human beings instead of understanding that we're standing on the shoulders of those who came before us in the most positive way. I think that can be problematic for a society, and I can understand how some people begin to feel, particularly people who are characterologically weak or socially, physically weak, people who are scared, people who are impoverished, people who are, in some instances, I'm not sure what the word would be, but people who are feel less than others can latch onto some idea presented by a film or by a television show that gives them the idea that the only thing that matters is what they can get over somebody else. And I think that's probably fundamental to the Donald Trump ethic, if you will. Other people don't matter. What matters is my achievement of my own my own desires. And I think that goes back to what I said, I think, earlier about his psychological makeup. This is a man who feels empty inside and needs to be fulfilled, and he feels the only way he can fulfill that is by achieving wealth and success and attention, because he doesn't understand that those things don't fulfill anything. And it's also why he has to lash back at people who are critics, because they touch very closely to the emptiness within him. And once he is reminded painfully of the emptiness within him, he has to lash out against that, rather than examine that and allow it to be filled with the important things in life. So, long way to say, I suppose, yes, if all we do in the motion picture and television industry is promote success in terms of beauty and money and power, we are making a huge mistake, because there are people who will believe that those are the only important things in life. But I don't think that's all that films and television do. I think there is too much of that, but I think there is great good that is being done. And it is that we, those of us who care in this industry, strive to do, to find ways to touch people and move them and allow them to experience their own emotions and experience through those emotions the joy of loving, the joy of appreciating another person or another element or another action, and recognizing the extraordinary good that comes from real human contact and real open, honest human exchange, interchange, communication. So the wonderful things that are done on stage or in film and on television are, I think, what enhance life and what enhance the people's possibilities to recognize the good and decent things in themselves. And in so doing, I think we make a great contribution rather than tear down that which is good in human beings.
Which movies characters movies characters is a better representation of Mr. Trump for you?
I don't think of, I'm trying to figure out a way to say that I don't think of characters in films or television as being representative of individuals. I think it tries to be the other way around. But the Gordon Geckos of this world, the Mussolinis of this world, the characters who I think Leonardo DiCaprio characterized someone recently in a film about the savage behaviors and the grotesque excesses of people on Wall Street. Those are people that exemplify what I think is the problem with Donald Trump. But I also think it's not just the desire to get over on people, the desire to have authority over people, the desire to be wealthy beyond words, and to surround oneself with guilt and gold and glitter, and to prove this self-imposed image. The fact is, at base, those people know that's all a lie. They know how empty their lives are, and they fight and they struggle against it. But the fact is that there's no denying that theirs is the empty life, and the true lives, the real lives, are the lives that we're all aware of. the Sister Helen Prejean, the people who give of themselves and work, whether it be to feed the poor or to the hungry, to deal with people in need, those who elevate, some are elevated to the levels of sainthood, but whether it's in a religious sense or not, people who are recognized as benefiting others, people who are recognized as being decent and thoughtful and sensitive and good, are always the paragons, the ones that we reach for. And I think ultimately people come to that understanding when the struggle against people like Mr. Trump, the struggle against what he represents, succeeds, and it will, people have a kind of an aha moment where they say, oh, of course, now I understand. Now I was persuaded somehow temporarily that was meaningful, that was necessary, that was an honorable or an honest way to behave, but it's not. It's simply false and empty and hopeless and meaningless. And that what we all have to do is really kind of come to the place where we understand that the people who are loving and decent and caring and thoughtful and who reach out and try and share and recognize and equalize the opportunities for others are the ones who are the true heroes.
Est-ce qu'on lui reparle juste de la vidéo? C'est pas la peine juste pour qu'il sache de quoi on parlait tout à l'heure. Parce que si vous l'avez retrouvé, just want to show you the video that we talked to you about earlier. You know, the short video that you participated in.
Okay, the one you mentioned that I participated in.
Yeah.
This one I saw. Come on.
Republican members of the Electoral College, this
Oh.
message,
Oh, I know that. Sure.
as you know, our founding fathers built the Electoral College.
You
I don't know if you
Sure.
if you have some words to say about
Well,
that, or
I said it. During the campaign for the recent campaign for the presidency, the one that Donald Trump unfortunately won, some of us got together at the request of some people to say there is an option that even though he got, he didn't get more votes, but he got more electoral votes. We have a very complicated system in this country, wherein it's not one person, one vote that ultimately matters. You can have more, as we did, you can have more people vote for another individual, but because of a way in which it's been arranged between the states, electoral votes are the ones that count. So it was understood that if the members of the Electoral College were to not do what they normally do, which is to simply go to the winner of the vote in their states, but voted individually as people who had a conscience, and said it's not in the best interest of the country for me to vote for this man, we will vote another way. So some of us were asked to take part in a documentary or a presentation on film about the election, and to tell people that there were ways that they could encourage the electors at the Electoral College to not elect Donald Trump. And I took part in that on the basis of what I said in it, which I didn't believe that he had the experience necessary to be the President of the United States. There were many other statements that were made with which I agreed, but that was, I was challenged on television by Tucker Carlson, for example, about my support for this option being offered to the electors. And I said, I think it's obvious, clearly obvious, that this man does not have the qualifications necessary in terms of intelligence, experience, or demonstrated personal values to be the President of the United States, to be the person with the capacity to lead, not only lead this country, but to be the most powerful leader in the world. And as many people have raised, to be the one who has the capacity to launch a nuclear weapon and start a nuclear war. I think that's a very great danger that we are now in as a result of having put this man in this position. So that's something I did out of my desire as a citizen to state my case and be I hate to use the term advantage, but to take advantage, if you will, of the fact that I have a heightened public profile because of the work I've done as an actor. But I don't apologize for that. I didn't create the system that says because I'm a successful actor, I have notoriety that raises my name and my visage to a place where people recognize it, and some people may be moved by my position once they hear it or see it, see it stated. So I am first and foremost a citizen of this country. And as a result of that, I have the right to my opinions and the right to state my opinions and to take action in support of my opinions. And if my opinion is given more authority or more attention because of the fact that I was on television, I don't apologize for that. As long as I'm voicing my opinion in a thoughtful, meaningful way, and I can back it up with my own experience and my own education, I will stand by it. And if somebody doesn't like it that I speak out because I'm an actor, that's their problem. Because I think teachers and nurses and doctors and children and students ought to have the same ability to speak out and have their voices heard. But because of the social values that are attributed in our society and the way they are attributed, it seems that some of us who have success in visual arts have more of a voice. So be it.
The puppet of Mr. Trump is here. Have you briefly some word for Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Trump, I believe you're doing great harm, and I'm sorry for the mental state that I believe you are in, the captive of. But I think you would do yourself, and you would do the nation, and you would do the world a great favor by simply resigning your office. And frankly, if you can persuade him to do so, ask Mr. Pence to resign with you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Really.
Moi je vais faire 2-3 points de tuile, si tu peux aller chercher de Blu-ray, et je gêne plus le reste.
T'as coupé?